So the Batman Brave and the Bold writer was just revealed. There has been some backlash online. Not only that, we got some more news out of DC Studios and also some more news from Marvel Studios. So with all that being said, let's get right into it because today we're doing a DC and Marvel news roundup. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. All right, so first things first, we have the Super Bowl coming up this Sunday. So that is what I'm going to talk about first. Obviously, with the Super Bowl comes a ton of anticipation for the commercials that they will release, and considering Marvel and DC do tend to release a trailer for upcoming projects during the Super Bowl to capitalize on all those people watching the Super Bowl, it would stand to reason for us fans to expect the same thing this year. However, it's being reported out of some pretty major trades that Marvel is going to skip the Super Bowl, which means no Avengers Doomsday trailer, and Sony has also confirmed that they are likely going to be skipping the Super Bowl. So let's look at why. Well, first and foremost, the cost to put an ad for 30 seconds in this year's Super Bowl is about $10 million. So it definitely makes sense why studios do not want to spend that amount of money advertising for one particular trailer, especially when you consider probably the biggest reason to have a Super Bowl ad is to help with brand recognition, which with Avengers, you don't need that. There have been 4 Avengers movies, and all 4 have made over $1 billion. And then let's go on to the other project, Spider-Man, the most popular superhero in the entire world. When they released the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, that literally did over 100 million views within the first few days. So I guarantee they are not worried about getting enough eyes on these two projects, as so many people are already talking about it. And if the decision is to either A, put these trailers during the Super Bowl and spend $10 million a piece, or B, just upload these trailers online, which is free, and spend that $10 million on other marketing strategies, I feel like they are absolutely going to do the latter option. It just makes way more sense, especially when you consider the projects in the past that they did advertise during the Super Bowl, the Thunderbolts and Captain America Brave New World. They did not do well at the box office. So why would they want to invest all of this money when in the past it hasn't worked out that well advertising during the Super Bowl? Now, they have had success in the past. However, considering the recent lack of success, it definitely makes sense for them not to include them during the Super Bowl. However, that being said, I could still see them uploading these trailers during the time of the Super Bowl to still capitalize around all the chatter that is happening about Marvel and DC. However, this way, they just don't have to pay that $10 million sum for the advertising space during the Super Bowl. So I could see a scenario in which they just do an upload directly to the internet around the time of the Super Bowl. However, aside from that, don't expect anything from Marvel because they have essentially confirmed that they will not be doing anything during the Super Bowl commercial breaks. With that being said, I did also mention DC. They will also be skipping the Super Bowl, which does make sense. Last year, they did not really do anything for the Super Bowl, even with the premiere of Superman. All they really did was something during the Puppy Bowl, and it was literally a 10-second clip of Guy Gardner, I believe, talking about that being the only bowl they like, something silly like that. So I do believe they are going to do something similar to that. James Gunn did confirm that during the Puppy Bowl, they will be showcasing something from Supergirl. Now, don't get your hopes too high and have these crazy expectations. A lot of people went into it last year with those expectations, and then when all we got was that little clip of Guy Gardner's bowl haircut, everyone was kind of pissed, very much so disappointed. So I would just say don't go into it with high expectations because I don't believe it is going to be anything major at all. In my opinion, at best, it will be something surrounding Lobo, maybe a cool little teaser around his character. All in all, I would be happy with that. Lobo is probably the thing that I am most looking forward to out of the Supergirl project. However, it does not end there. Well, at least the Super Bowl talks end there. But when talking about DC, it does not end there. because we actually got a major confirmation for the future of DC. And I haven't seen a ton of people talk about it. I think I've seen one or two creators actually mention this. So I'm going to jump on it and mention it as well. Robert Pattinson is officially not going to be the Batman in the DCU. Yes, I know that might sound obvious. That might sound like it's been confirmed before, and to a degree it has. However, James Gunn was directly asked, I believe on Threads, I will put it up on screen, if Robert Pattinson would be the DCU Batman, and James Gunn just straight up said no. There is no ambiguity anymore. He is just outright saying no, confirming Robert Pattinson will not be the DCU Batman. What are my overall thoughts on this? Generally, I have two. You see, there are pros and there are cons to having Robert Pattinson in the DCU as the Batman. Well, realistically, in my opinion, there's only two pros. Those two pros are we would have an established Batman. The Batman 1 has already come out. The Batman 2 has already been written. Therefore, the first time we would see Batman in the DCU, he would be an established Batman that we have a relationship with, that we've already watched go on at least one adventure, and potentially go on a second adventure if he would be in the DCU before his sequel film were to release. The other pro I could see is how different Gotham City in the Batman feels to Metropolis in the Superman movie. That is something that I have wanted for a very long time. I feel like, similar to how they do it in comics, having a very different tone, a very different atmosphere surrounding Gotham City than what surrounds Metropolis is absolutely amazing and helps show you the differences between the two cities. Yes, they take place in the same universe, but they operate in a very different capacity, and that also reflects in the heroes that defend them. Batman was created to punish the evil, to strike fear into criminals, to seek vengeance against those who would wrong others, whereas Superman is someone who flies through the sky, inspiring hope into people, inspiring people to be better, giving hope for a better tomorrow. Hence the title, Superman, Man of Tomorrow. So with all that being said, I do think those are realistically the only two pros to having Robert Pattinson be the DCU Batman. However, when we look at the cons, to me, they definitely outweigh any pros that we could get, because with those pros, we do still have the opportunity to get that with the DCU Batman without Pattinson. Whereas if it is Pattinson, these cons will be apparent. And to me, the biggest one, we need our DCU Batman to be fantastical. I'm talking, if he faces off against Darkseid, I want him to be able to dodge Omega beams. I want him to be operating similar to how Teen Titans Robin operates. Give me a couple knee drops off of skyscrapers. Give me some insane jumps that no human could achieve. Give me some feats like the '04 The Batman series. I want the DCU Batman to essentially be a super soldier. He is supposed to be the peak human. And nothing against Robert Pattinson, I just feel like his version of Batman has been a much more grounded Batman. So thrusting him into this very fantastical world would feel very out of place, especially if all of a sudden he's going from struggling against thugs to now dodging Omega beams, to going up against Superman in one of their first meetings. So to me, I am ultimately glad they are going to have a different Batman in the DCU. However, let me know what all of you think in the comments below. But that being said, that is not all. Because speaking of DCU Batman, we actually got some more confirmations about the movie. We got revealed to us who the writer is, and thus that is where all of the backlash started to come from. And the writer will be Christina Hodson. Now, if any of you have not heard of any of her work, some of the projects that she has written in the past have been The Flash, Birds of Prey, the canceled Batgirl movie, and the canceled Batman Beyond movie. So that is why a lot of people are starting to have worries about the Batman Brave and the Bold project, not just because all of those movies were deemed not successful, considering two of them were literally canceled, and the Batgirl movie was canceled because Warner Brothers could not put that movie out as it would be detrimental to the studio and to the brand. Now, is that true? Was that just a ploy as a way to write it off as a tax cut? We will never know. However, seeing some of the test footage from behind the scenes, I could definitely see how that movie was not great. It was supposed to be a lower budget film. However, considering myself and likely no one else will ever see the final cut, we can never truly know. However, what we can know about is that the Birds of Prey movie and the Flash movie were not good movies. If you like those movies, great, more power to you. However, I personally and a lot of the other general audience and the comic book audience were not fans of those two projects. And James Gunn actually did come out in defense of this writer and said a lot of things get lost in translation at times. If you are not directing the project that you wrote, it could end up being very different and missing key points and key beats that you do have specifically written. However, that being said, that actually adds a little bit more worry. And here's why. Do all of you know who the director for the Batman Brave and the Bold movie is? It is the same director, Andy Muschietti, who directed The Flash, which means as a creative team, we have the writer and director for the Flash movie. And if what James Gunn is saying is accurate, that it doesn't all fall on the screenwriter and some of the blame can be placed on the director and the different directions and creative liberties they do take the film in, well then we are in quite a bit of trouble, considering the general audience and a lot of comic book fans did not like the Flash movie. So considering a big part of the creative team from the Flash is now in charge of the Batman Brave and the Bold film is definitely a big sign for worry for fans. And then there are some rumors that James Gunn is actually going to be directing Batman Brave and the Bold. I do not personally believe that is going to be the case. I feel like he would be stretching himself too thin, as he is directing the Man of Tomorrow movie, which is releasing in 2027. So 1 year later is when Batman Brave and the Bold is rumored to be released, 2028 to 2029. So I just feel like that timeline would be a little bit too rushed. And I personally, although I do like James Gunn as a director, I would not want that for two reasons. One, him being stretched too thin, but two, and perhaps the bigger thing, is as I mentioned earlier, I want Gotham City to feel almost as if it is an entirely different world than Metropolis. And I feel like one of the best ways to do that is having two different directors be in charge of Superman and Batman. So if you have James Gunn, who directed the first Superman movie and now is directing the second, he should not, in my opinion, direct the Batman film. However, all in all, we cannot know if this film is going to be good or bad until we start hearing more about it. I just do somewhat understand the worries that comic book fans are having, not only because of the writer, because I do agree it is not all on her, it is also on the director to execute the vision. However, if you consider now the creative team who will be writing and directing the Batman Brave and the Bold movie were the people who were responsible for the Flash project, which did not do well, it lost a lot of money, then you can understand why a lot of fans are up in arms about this. However, to me, I feel like DC has the perfect opportunity to introduce the DCU Batman and do it in a way that has not been done before, and do it in a way that it is not done in a Batman project. And I know there are some rumors that Batman will appear in Man of Tomorrow. I'm hoping that does not happen. That would essentially be exactly what they did in the Snyderverse. Not to say I did not enjoy the Snyderverse, I just feel like we shouldn't do the exact same thing, introducing Batman once again in Superman's second film. I feel like that is silly to me. Instead, I feel like what they should do is we have an upcoming Clayface movie at the end of this year. So why not have Batman appear in that film? Still have it be about Clayface. However, introduce Batman as an antagonist, because for the majority of the movie, we will be following the tragedy of Clayface. We will be seeing his metamorphosis into the character of Clayface. So it would make sense that us, the audience, would see Batman as an antagonist because we would be seeing the story from Clayface's point of view. And I feel like introducing Batman in that way would just be really awesome. It would be very unique, and it would give a very different feel right off the bat to the DCU Batman. And it's actually something similar to what they did in the animated movie Batman Assault on Arkham. You don't have to have Batman be in a ton of the movie. Just have him be in key parts. Have him be towards the end where he takes on Clayface, the final form of Clayface. And we would then get to see how fantastical this version of Batman truly is going to be. However, ranting aside, that is all the news that I do have today. Let me know your thoughts on everything that I did cover in this video. Would you personally agree with all my thoughts on how the DCU Batman should be introduced and executed in the DC universe, let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.